Hey, I hope it is going great. Today you're going to learn pretty much everything you need to know to start creating queries using GraphQL. You will learn which problem it tries to solve and which advantages it has over a REST API. What is GraphQL? GraphQL is a language-independent query language. That means it can be used with any language and any database system. When working with REST APIs, we expose several endpoints that can be used to get, post, update or delete data. While it works just fine in many cases, over time the number of endpoints increases, making your REST API harder to maintain. Depending on how it's structured, retrieving the data you need from your REST API could take more than one request, or you even fetch more data than you need. That's also known as overfetching or underfetching. GraphQL, on the other hand, exposes only one endpoint. When sending, for example, a GET request to that endpoint, we can tell it exactly which data we want to fetch. On top of queries, which are used to fetch data, we can use mutations to manipulate data, whether that is updating a record, deleting one, or creating a new one. Now, some important notes. GraphQL is not a replacement for SQL, despite the common suffix, but it is a replacement for REST APIs. You can see that I'm on GraphiQL, which is a nice browser tool for playing around with queries. That's an online version of this you can check out under this URL. I'm going to have it linked down in the description. Anyway, let's get rid of this huge comment. Okay, and every query in GraphQL starts with opening and closing curly brackets. Basically, in order to make our lives easier, this gives us a set of schemas we can query from. And in order to look at what it gives us, we can open up this docs and go to this root element. And we see all people. We're going to use this. And then let's type in all people. And then again, opening and closing curly brackets, and we get a syntax error. If we take a look at the root element again, we see after, first, before and last, which are the parameters which we can pass to all people. Again, more on that later. But let's for now click on this people connection. And in here we can see page, info, edges, total count and people. So let's try out total count and hit run. And you see we get 87, which is the total number of objects in this connection, basically the people. Let's now try out what happens if we type in people instead. Okay, as you can see we get a syntax error with expected name. So let's go in here and really just type in name. And you see that we seem to get all of the names in our schema. Again, let's go to the documentation and click on person. And in here we can see all of the fields which are available to us. And let's try out birth year. And instead of now getting only the name, we also get the birth year. And let's try out eye color. And you see how it goes. Now that we have that, let's go back to our all people and try out a parameter. We use opening and closing brackets. And you can see all of the options which we have. Let's try out first. And then a colon. And then however many we want. As you can see, it's an integer type, so let's say 10. And hit run. And we only get 10. And likewise, if we try 2, we get only the first 2. And similarly, we could use last and get the last 2. Awesome, so now we also covered parameters. And if you remember from my introduction, I said that we divide whatever we can do in GraphQL into, first of all, queries and then mutations. And this is a query because we are getting data from the schema. And it's really just a shorthand we are using. But if we wanted to explicitly name this query a certain way, we could use the query keyword and then type in whatever name we wanted. Let's say last 2 people. And it works the same way, only that we now assigned a name to our query. And again, one of the main advantages of GraphQL is that you can fetch whatever you want without needing to send multiple requests. And let's say we wanted to get the first 2 and last 2 people. So again, we have the last 2 already. And before that, let's type in all people. Or really, let's just copy this over. And instead of last 2, let's try out first 2. Oh. Fields all people conflict because they have different arguments. Okay, and it also gives us the solution, which is to use aliases. And aliases are a way for us to name the output of what we get. Let's say this was first 2 people, And then we can use a colon. And then here we can use last two people. And we would change the query to, I guess, first and last two people. And now you see we get first two and the last two. Awesome. All of that in one single query. That's what's so great about GraphQL, is that you only get the data you need and not more and not less. But what's still bugging me is that we have this repetition here going on. We have name, birth, year and eye color for both of these. There has to be a way for us to fragment this out. And to do this we use fragments. Sounds intuitive. So let's create a fragment and call this people fields. And now we have to specify on which object we're going to use this. And if we go back to our people connection and look at people, you see that this is of type person. So that's what we're going to use. Fragments, people fields on person. And now just type in all of the fields we wanted. So name, birth, year, then eye color. And instead of now repeating ourselves twice, we can use 3 dots and then people fields. And also up here. And you can see the same output. And if we wanted to extend this to, let's say, also include the gender and hair color and height, then it would update on both of these. What if we wanted to make this query a bit more diverse, in that we don't only want to be able to get the first two or last two, but we wanted to get the first n or last n, basically whatever we pass to our query. Let's rename this query to first and last n people. I'm not really sure about the name, but whatever, let's go with this. And in order to be able to pass a variable, we use the dollar symbol. And then let's call this n. And then a colon and the data type, which in this case is going to be int. And instead of first two, we're going to use first $n. And here last $n. And while in the next part we're going to cover how to get variables from Python into your query, let's for now use a default argument. And we do this via setting this equal to, let's say 5. And now we get the first and last 5. And I guess we should rename this to first n people instead. Again, we are not going to cover best practices as far as naming goes, but I think you get the idea. And last, I want to cover how you can use booleans in order to check whether you want a piece of data or not. And just for making a bit of space, I'm going to close this documentation. And we're going to take in a second variable to do so. Let's call this $some boolean of type boolean, which we're going to set to true by default. We can do this via what are called directives. Directives always start with an add symbol. Let's use add. And you can already see two options, either include or skip. We're going to use include. And then open up brackets. And you can already see which option we have in here, which is if, and then a colon. And then the condition, which is in this case whatever we pass to our query, which was $some boolean. Let's run this. And in this case you don't see any change because we set this to true. And we said that people should only be fetched if the some boolean is true. But if we change this to false, then this is skipped. And likewise we can use the add skip. And by running it with the false argument, you can see that we still get both of them because we specified that we only want to skip this if some boolean is true, which in this case it's not. I think you've got a pretty good idea of how we can use queries to do some pretty powerful things as far as fetching goes. In the next part we're going to jump into Python with Graphene and build our own schema, and also cover mutations on top of that. Make sure to let me know in the comments down below if you like this video and subscribe to this channel. I hope to see you inside of the next one. Take care and cheers!